Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And today we are sort of getting into an intermediate place for our topic of conversation. One that I wouldn't necessarily think is relevant to our particular hobby, or little subsector of it at least. But after some thought, I think it is, and it's worth discussing. And that means we're going to have to break into a little bit of, sociology to talk about the concept of places. And specifically the third one, not the first and second ones, the third ones.
It's like a sci-fi movie title, The Third Place.
I'd watch it. I'd try it. It probably wouldn't be good, but if it's on a streaming service, I'd give it a click. And that is an idea that will break apart, but it largely says that being in places with groups of people purely to have a good time could be good for you. But we've noticed that in some hobby stores, maybe that is becoming less and less common as the focus in some areas shift from sort of creating a hobby gaming place or a club instead of to just being a store. And I think it's worth asking, should game stores be just retail? Or do we want to try to push for a place that is more community-oriented?
But first,
hobby time and games played. John, what have you been up to?
Well, quite a bit, actually. Since we haven't done a podcast actual episode in a little bit. I haven't got to explain all the adventures I've gone on.
It has been a minute.
Yeah. So, in preparation for AOS 4, I've worked on Skaven a little bit. I haven't, surprisingly enough, haven't done a lot of painting. I've been building a bunch of stuff for Conquest to just sort of get ready for my tournament next week. At this point that you're probably watching this, I've already been at the tournament. So that'll be fun. And other than that, I went to Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio, and met a bunch of games people and hobbyists and gamers, and played a bunch of board games and bought a bunch of board games. Saw the Conquest booth there, saw the Warhammer booth there. Just did a bunch of different stuff. They had a huge Fallout booth there, just all sorts of different things. Played a Malifaux demo at the Malifaux area. Just sort of had a great time. 4 days of just gaming at a convention center. It was quite a time.
Yeah, I was unfortunately unable to go, but it sounds like everybody had a blast.
Yeah.
They melted inside of an overly hot pizza shop while way too intoxicated, but
it was a thing at some point. It was. There was a heat dome. While we were doing this, it was 110 degrees, and so as you can imagine, my goofy ass was walking around Columbus, Ohio in 110 degree weather, mildly intoxicated. I would say I had a couple of alcoholic beverages, and then decided that at 9 p.m. I wanted pizza. And I thought the inside of that would not be quite as hot as outside, and I was wrong. It was very, very warm.
Hotter than outside.
But it was worth it. That pizza was great.
I mean, you had to go through a trial to get to the pizza. It better be wonderful.
It was quite enjoyable. And then I proceeded to go back to the convention center and play board games till late into the night.
Refueled on pizza, though. That's the key.
It was very good. Very good time. If you haven't been to Origins, it's a great time.
I'm hoping I could go next year, because it sounds like small Gen Con, and I really enjoyed Gen Con.
Mini Gen Con is a great way of describing it. So if you find that Gen Con's just too much, or it's just a lot of a hassle, I think Origin's really nice.
Yeah, because I find personally for me, the hobby I enjoy the most is probably tabletop wargaming. The one I want to go to a convention for is not tabletop war games. It's sub-tabletop war games, and then board games and tabletop RPGs. that's my convention vibe. In like Gen Con, and it sounds like Origins hit that pretty well.
Yeah, so it's a nice little mix. Because there is wargaming stuff at Origins. It's just not all that. And like one day we'll go to Adepticon, and that'll be great. And that's like all war games. But that is also an endeavor. It's quickly becoming more difficult to do Adepticon every year.
Yeah, the numbers go higher. My want to go stays the same, but the logistics, overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've also played some Conquest to prep.
I've played like 5 or 6 games of just like the same list with my Wadroon for the tournament to prep and get ready for like this tournament. So it's just been a lot of like repetition. Mostly against Sorcerer Kings, which has been an interesting matchup. But I've learned a lot about Wadroon, and like we'll get into it in a later episode. But like some of these units, some of the combos that you can do with Wadroon, I think are good competitively, but I don't know if like it's intended. Like it could be intended, but if it is intended, it's really like kind of odd. Particularly like being able to pull off multiple activations beyond 3. Like I have a Slingers unit that can triple activate because of things that it can do, and being able to get it to a point where it can do like
5 activations.
5 activations. Like, it requires a Goldilocks situation to happen, like a perfect storm, if you will. You can't just go, oops, I do 5 activations whenever I want. But the idea that you could get to 5 is sort of like, wow.
It's a lot. He's a whole lot. That one little unit did a whole lot. I'm interested to see how that does at the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I have questions.
And, like, I could be missing something that's wrong. I'm wrong about. Like, maybe. Like, there's some people coming to the tournament that are like probably like better players than I am just in general, and probably know the rules better than I do. And if they catch me doing something wrong, they'll probably be like, hey, that doesn't work at all how you think it is. I think it does after reading all the rules, but I could be wrong. So I'm interested to see. I could get disqualified. Who knows?
John, disqualified. Round 1.
Yeah. I'm excited to play in the Conquest tournament. I think it'll be a fun experience. We're going to talk about it on the show, too. Like, just generally, how it goes. But this is my first Wargaming actual tournament in a long time. It's been, like, a long time since I've gone to a tournament. So.
Yeah, it was going to be my first tournament, but I decided to bow out for, like, very, very particular structural reasons, but we'll talk about it. But we want to wait until after the event to see how it goes. For me, I have been doing... My brain always does the thing of like, well, you haven't painted anything, you haven't done anything. But I have done a lot of hobby stuff. I have been building like a madman, which is tough for me because I don't like building. It's the part I like the least in hobbying. But
it's your weakness.
It is, but it's the part I have to do to get started on anything. So I have been working on the Imperial Knights. I got the last of the first... the like medium knight magneted up and now magnetized, and it's ready to go. And then I made 2 baby knights, and those are now done. And those are just waiting for magnets now that they are fully built and sub-assembled, which was easier than the big knight sub-assembly. I am helping my wife to get through her Imperial Knight that she offered to build for me, but just sub-assemblies are sort of finicky and intimidating. That's going well. I ordered another Imperial Knight, but alas, I have to wait for it to get here, so I kind of had to pivot. And then I've been building some Conquest stuff to try to get ready to help John do tournament prep. So almost fully built a Hellbringer Drake, which is really nice. It'll be my first Hellbringer Drake to go alongside my Ironclad Drake.
Mm-hmm.
So, bringing the dragons to the table. Well, not dragons, drakes. Dragons would summon a whole bunch of angry dwarves on my head. And I don't... Well, dwag them! Well, I'm done. Now that I'm in the Book of Grudges, I also have been doing some games that aren't war games. Death Wizards from Snarling Badger Games. I have played 3 or 4 games of Death Wizards, and it's been really, really fun.
Yeah, I've also been playing Death Wizards with you. I've played like 2 or 3 games myself. We'll cover that on the future as well. It's looking super fun. Like, not to spoil our future episode, but Death Wizard's a good time.
Death Wizards is a really good time, and honestly, we almost feel ready to do the show on it, but there's we have been doing co-op mode where you, fight heroes and stuff, but there's also a mode where you fight each other in, a skirmish war game battle, and I want to try that before I talk about the game as a whole. That is the thing we have not done, so after we can get a chance to do a little skirmish game against each other, that's when we'll probably throw down an episode of Death Wizards, but so far, very exciting. I've enjoyed it a lot. And it's even gotten some big war game people in our friend group doing war games, which is freaking stellar.
Spooky time game with skeletons and weird dudes and spooky fingers.
And I've also done a little bit of painting now. I wanted to try to rehash my Dwegum Flames scheme, because I like the actual colors I have. Like the greens and the metals and whatnot. I think those look really nice, but the flames just were not doing it for me on the test mini. So instead, trying some blends through an airbrush with some inks, and it is looking far better. I just gotta keep on hammering away at it. I gotta go in with some red. I think that will round it off quite nicely.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be painting Dwegum soon in the near future, which is wonderful, because then I can get into their good graces and out of the Book of Grudges for everything I just said.
Good call.
Yeah. And I imagine I'm going to be doing a lot of that sort of getting the gumption to keep painting it by hanging out at the local game store, which for us is a bit of a third space. Let's talk about it. Okay, John, if we're going to talk about this...
Okay, Joe.
More than normal, I do think we really, really have to define this one, because it is a concept I have heard spoken about on the internet, but it is not a thing that I think is nearly common parlance.
Yeah, this has been around for a while, right? The concept of a third place is a sociological, academic theory, right? You have places, and they all have purposes. This is probably a concept that once we explain it, you're going to go, oh, that makes sense. Why does this have to be a book written about it? Well, because for a lot of people, it sort of helps contextualize what, could just kind of fall through the cracks of society in a lot of ways. And to, start off, it's a theory written by a man named Ray Oldenburg from 1989. And it is sort of talks about the 3 major places in a society or a community. The first place being a home, right? As a person, you have a home that you go to. That's where you sleep. That's where you might do some work. That's where you're going to raise your family. That's where you're going to interact with the people closest to you. That's probably where you're going to experience a lot of your life, is home. And then the second place are places like work or the store or I don't know, hardware shop, right? Places where you have to go for specific purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Work, you have to go to work to make money. You have to go to the grocery store to buy groceries. The objective when going to those places is to simply do the task at that thing.
Mm-hmm.
If work, for instance, you don't want to necessarily go to work, and though you might enjoy your work, you might not enjoy your work. Regardless, you have to go to it.
Yeah. If you want to pay your bills in your first place, you gotta go to your second place.
But the third place, which is arguably not the most important, but the easiest to overlook, is a communal meeting space. These are places like libraries, coffee shops, churches, things, right? Places that, especially in modern days, we are seeing less and less of. Places in what we jokingly call meat space, where you have to interact with other people and sort of do stuff with. And the important thing is that a third place, unlike a grocery store, does not demand that you are spending a ton of money, right? In a grocery store, you're going there and you're spending money on groceries. That is the activity. A place like a coffee shop is instead you're getting coffee and then sitting at a table, and you might communicate with other people. A bar, you're going to get a drink, you're going to talk to people. Right? It's a space. It is a neutral, leveled ground where you're standing in society. Like how much money you make, yada, 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 may not matter as much. Sometimes it does. Oftentimes it's like a place, like a melting pot, where those people from different levels of society can meet each other. And to like sort of round out this definition, give some examples. We've all seen sitcoms.
Yes.
All of us, right? And in every sitcom, they have a meeting place. Sometimes it's one person's house that all the characters are coming to. Sometimes it is a coffee shop, like in Friends at Central Perk, where they are meeting at the coffee shop. Even though they go to each other's houses in different scenes, the coffee shop is also a character in itself because they're showing up there.
It's a neutral place. And if you're looking for somebody, you just go check if they're at Central Perk. Like, it's a whole thing.
Another good example is like Cheers. The whole show is built off of it.
Mm-hmm. I will say, around here, one of the things that comes to mind are dive bars. Like,
yeah,
I have family who, like, they're older, they're retirement age, and their thing is they hang out at like a particular dive bar on particular days, and there are other people who do the same thing, and they are the regulars, and they just order something. They're not like drinking hard, and they watch TV, they play pool, and they relax at the dive bar because that's where they can meet people and have conversations and enjoy themselves. Also, VFW halls around here where I'm at, like that's the thing that sometimes people just go there to shoot the shit when they can. They'll play, euchre or whatever, but like you're not there to spend money. You're there for people and camaraderie and community.
And like growing up in schools, right? Like most people who go to public school, I remember a cafeteria or a study hall. And in like one of those times in the school day where the objective wasn't necessarily to attend a class, but was mostly to hang out with your friends and like maybe eat, maybe do a thing. Like, but it was almost like a free time. And like, it's also romanticized when people think about like, oh, we want to go back to traditional values, yada, yada, yada. They will talk about places like karaoke bars or like ice cream parlors or like diners where like you could just go to a place and talk to people and hang out, and you could be there for like 4 or 5 hours and no one said anything. Right? It's a romanticized idea of what this is. So it's a thing that like everyone has experienced at some point or knows about. But in relation to our hobby, for a long time, particularly like when I was growing up, was the game store, right? The game store was a third place, or like for me, I could, after school, walk to a store and see models on the shelf, people playing games. I could probably maybe borrow some models from maybe the store owner. I could have my own models in a locker and pull them out and play them. Or if I didn't want to play a game, I could just hang out with the other people that were there looking at stuff, or just like maybe painting in the corner, or like reading a book, like a rule book. Maybe like you have 2 people discussing a rule book at a table. Like that was just a common thing. It was like a club in a lot of ways. And that is, to me, the definition of a third place.
In the hobby, especially, like I think that sort of game club or the game shop, for many of us, when like as we discuss this concept, you probably go, "Oh, like that could be a game store." Yes, exactly.
But there might be many of you out there who have never experienced that, who have never seen that, or they don't have access to that, or they don't see it ever, right? Because more and more recently, it is becoming clear that like a lot of these stores are just becoming physical retail locations. They are becoming like a place that you can go and have the spectacle of like looking at all the stuff on the shelves and maybe buying a thing every couple of weeks, maybe every like month or so, maybe every couple of months, right? And that is not a third place. That is a shop. Like that is a place you're going to buy a thing. It then becomes a place where you are going, I want to go buy this thing. I'm going to go to this thing, this place, buy that thing, and go home. You're not going to like hang out and talk to people. You're not going to like play a game or do a thing because there's no space to do so there, right? A lot of shops are starting to just have walls and walls of product and like lots and lots of shelf space. and a big storeroom full of boxes and boxes and boxes that are all on demand, so that instead of someone ordering something online, they can physically walk in here and buy it immediately to go home and play it. But they're not going to play it there.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of is removing the idea of a third place game store from a lot of particularly new hobbyist minds. Where playing this game is now becoming a thing where they just do it in their own homes or in their friends' homes.
Mm-hmm. In their like already pre-existing little groups. Which, again, is a very particular distinction to make when talking about whether or not something is a third space.
The other reasons why this is happening is because like the hobby is generally inconvenient, right? Like you have to buy, build, paint, make, keep up with a ton of stuff to stay in this hobby.
I mean, example, like let's say John and I, like let's say this was our first thing we were doing. We were just getting into AOS 4.0 and we were going to split the Age of Sigmar box with each other that's about to come out. One of us is taking Rats, one of us is taking Stormcast. How are we going to play it against each other? Well, you got to open the box, we divvy up the sprues, we get the build instructions, we get the clippers, we get the glue, we get the files, and then we are going to painstakingly clipper and file and remove mold lines for all of these minis, and then we're going to glue them together, and then we got to put them on bases, and then let's assume we're not even going to paint them. Like, we've got to get all of that put together. Now we got to build lists. We got to learn the rules. Like, it's just... It is hard to do and time-consuming to do, even at a baseline.
And that can be surmountable in the location, right? Like, you could have a, like, launch party where you have people buying the boxes and splitting it and building it and, like, hanging out and, like, watching a movie while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Or just, like, generally, like, that's an event you could do in the store if you have the space, right? But when you have 1 or 2 tables completely in your store dedicated to playing, and that's it. Everything else is just store space and people shopping. It quickly becomes a place where you could maybe fit 4 people at an event, and that's not really an event. That's just like 4 people hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on top of that, the nature of our hobby currently is much faster than it used to be. It used to be that releases came out measured in months, not measured in weeks. And so people are having to learn things quicker, and it's harder to just pick up and play a game with people because you have to understand like more about the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the final part about why these are sort of disappearing is that the need for them is disappearing. A lot of these used to exist because it was the only way you could interact with the community. You could, like, showing up to a game store, meeting the local group, the local scene, and sort of getting and sitting down at a table with them and playing games and getting to know them was the way that you got in games with people that weren't your usual one buddy.
Mm-hmm.
But with the advent of the internet, it has become more and more of a thing where people can just go onto Reddit and meet people. They can go onto Facebook groups and meet people. They can go into Discord and meet people. And then from those places, do meetups at houses, do meetups at, like, random office spaces they rent. Like, not, like, long-term, but you can, like, rent out a library room for a day and then play a game in there. You can, like, go to your buddy's house or his basement and play a game. You might go to a store and plan to do it, but you're going to show up at the store at 4 p.m., play your game, and then go home.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to hang out. You're going to go there, play with the guy that you met on Discord, and then you're going to go home. You're not going to care. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly after COVID, it's gotten more so that way. People have sort of segregated, in a lot of ways, particularly in the hobby, how they spend time in the hobby. For many of them, they show up, do their one thing, either at like a tournament, or they'll go to a convention at set times, and outside of that, they completely interact with it, either in their own space, or very little at all. It's also part of this is why we're seeing a bigger change in how people interact with it, where a lot of people are, even like with Warhammer, keeping up with the rules, buying the miniatures, and never playing the game.
It's wild to me, but I could see how it happens.
If you don't have a store where you can hang out with and slowly feel comfortable in, and sort of like with a bunch of people that are now your friends, and play games with, it now becomes an insurmountable task to plan and schedule and create an event to play. And instead of being able to just show up on a random Wednesday night and having be fairly sure you'll have an opponent, you don't know who it is, and then just have your army and be like, I'm here to play, right? Like, it becomes a little bit harder to do. And that could be bad for our community. Like, and that leads us to the final thing we're going to talk about, which is probably going to be the bulk of this episode. Why is this important? And if you don't have one, why you should look at potentially trying to create at least a facsimile of what this is.
Yeah, because all of this is very subjective. Like, this episode from the rip is subjective, right? And I think that's the key that makes this sort of interesting to ponder, and not so much because we, as like people making this episode, can give you, the listener, an answer. Instead, it is more so that it's worth posing this question to yourself on if you feel that, if you resonate with this idea and there are places in your life that you want to go to for fulfillment and socialization and community. And if there isn't, do you want to go to one? And that's going to be different for everyone. However, I think it's at least worth talking through why, like, at least for me, and I can safely say for John, we enjoy having a third space because they, in the benefits they have brought us, and stumbling into them and finding one accidentally. Well, there was a little bit of purpose, but I didn't even know what the concept was at the time. So, basically, what you get out of this is a hobbyist from a very narrow hobby perspective. I'm gonna just push aside a bunch of like psychological and sociological questions that pop up because this gets way too academic for me way too quickly. But as a hobbyist who likes war games, you like painting, you like socializing, you like modeling, you like kit bashing, what does that give you? Why is it important?
And how is it different from just doing all this at home and on Discord, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the thing is that it acts as a watering hole, so to speak, that draws everyone together, where you could share ideas to improve at whatever it is you're trying to do. So, for example, one of the things that happens often when we're at the shop is someone will be talking, and we're like talking through what we're working on or hobbying on, because it's just like common question, like what you've been doing. And if someone is stuck and they don't know how to do something, we can then, like, as a group, it just sort of happens on its own of, oh, well, like, we might have ideas on how to help you. I'll give an example that, like, Drew, friend of the show, Conquest player, plays with us here in Cincinnati, was hanging out, and he mentioned that, like, yeah, like, here's this army I'm working on. I'm really happy with all of these models, but I've got these ghost dudes that I'm just not quite sure that I quite like how they're looking yet. I don't know how to get through some of these effects. And then all of us, just sort of like, without even thinking about it, drifted over to look at these ghost models. Many of us who have been painting different types of minis for various amounts of time, to look at it and go, oh, like, well, have you considered trying X? Or maybe Y? To which, if we weren't there to pose those options, Drew would have no idea that those were things he could do, because he's newer to the painting hobby.
Or he might have to, like, go down a YouTube rabbit hole to maybe find something that would help him, right?
Yes. And
Whereas,
maybe it would seem more intimidating than it actually is. Because if your bud could just go, oh man, like, yeah, OSL's real intimidating and stuff, but like you could simulate it with dry brushing and it'll look just fine. Like it changes the tone. And it also opens the floor to, yeah, and if you have problems doing this technique, feel free to just like shoot me a message. Like, it's cool. Or if you want to like meet here and we could do it in person, cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
Which is something that isn't simulated in a YouTube video.
Yeah, and I think beyond just hobby, like just painting and kit bashing and stuff, but like playing the game, learning the game, doing the game stuff of this as well, right? Like the biggest takeaway is that regardless of what level of the thing in your hobby you're doing, whether it's gaming, painting, building, yada, 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 list building, you can have a personalized sort of approach and assistance around, and in a collaborative, community-based like situation, right? Like, it's really easy to like sort of get lost in a lot of the hobby, just like scrolling Reddit, watching YouTube, reading about the updates as they're coming out. But then like instead, if you're at a place where you're hanging out with like a bunch of people, and some people are playing games, some people are just talking about the new edition or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, have you seen like this thing you can do?" And you're like, "Oh, I never thought of that. Like, that's cool." Oh, you play, like, and meeting someone else who plays the same faction as you, right? Like, if I play Skaven, and another person plays Skaven, and he's like, yeah, this is my Skaven list. And I go, oh, I'm doing this Skaven list. And like, oh, well, why are you doing this? Oh, well, why are you doing that? Oh, let's look at each other's models. And it becomes like that cool, like, showing each other your toys situation.
Yeah.
Which is super fun. Like, it sounds silly, and this sounds, like, very obvious, but that's missing, right? When your only touchstones for in-person interactions with the hobby are tournaments and conventions, and occasionally maybe a pickup game with a person that you don't know and you don't have a chance to make a regular like connection with. It can get awkward. Like, it can make the game, like, even though this is a social game, feel isolating. And sort of like it denormalizes the idea of being in like playing this as a social activity, not just as a like expression of skill.
Yes,
because it can be both, right?
Yes, because that's the thing. Like, I also think there's something to be said for like a third space that has like people playing games in a community increases your skill. Because it's very easy, after you've played some games with a number of people, to one, you get more perspective than just like your two buddies who you would play in the basement with otherwise. They are going to come up against different people who have different levels of skill and different play styles that you might not get exposed to otherwise. So you're going to get more experience under your belt when you game, which is just going to make you better at games generally. Also, from those extra perspectives, you could get feedback while you're at the shop. It happens all the time of like, oh, we got done with our game. That was really fun. Like, you want to like talk about what happened? Like, you need a cigarette? Cool. Let's step outside and like, what do you think worked for you? What do you think I could have done better? And especially if you are playing in a group who gets together regularly, you're all going to start to understand each other's like strengths and weaknesses, and you can help each other to try to hedge those bets. Especially if you're trying to like do a group tournament prep situation.
Or, like we were talked about in a previous episode, if you're trying to do like a narrative situation where you're trying to like push a narrative style event, or maybe a narrative league, or like a narrative like thing that requires more trust, requires more understanding and like buy-in from people, doing it in a third place style situation where everyone there sort of gets to know each other, and like maybe you all collectively, because of democracy, pick one person to be like in charge of the house rules for our narrative game. Okay, well, we've all elected to trust this person's judgment with rules, and we've all agreed, and like we all have buy-in, we all care, and you guys get to create cool, fun moments. Much like with Dungeons and Dragons, you enjoy your Dungeons and Dragons team, like your whole party, where you all like you have fun moments, you remember the cool stuff that happens. I mean, our shop we go to, they have a Blood Bowl league that infects everyone else's games with joy, because they put little signs all over the shop about all the stuff going on with their Blood Bowl league. Like, they make fun little posters. They make like
There's
they
a
have
prop.
a huge.
There's a toilet in the shop right now as a prop from a Blood Bowl league.
Yeah.
Like, we just went to the shop yesterday to play a pickup game, and in the shop was someone taken a toilet and like put it onto a fiberboard so it could be its own stand, and then put it in the shop instead of having a chair next to the game table where they were playing Blood Bowl League. His team was called the Upper Deckers, so he brought in a whole toilet and then used that to sit on the upper deck of the toilet, which also was filled with ice and had beer in it, to play his championship game. That's asinine, and I love it. And you're not going to get that with just like your tiny two-man team.
And they have a big sign like that just says, and it's written like it's on a piece of paper, and it's written with marker, and it says "Stinky ogres better than," and so it says "Pretty ogres better than stinky rat men."
Yes,
and it's just like trash talking the other Blood Bowl teams, and it's fun. Like, it's not done in like a mean-spirited way at all. It's all just fun. And the amount of times we've been at the shop playing a game like Conquest or anything, and other people randomly show up. I don't know their names. They don't know my names, and they're like, hey, what's this thing you got? Or like, oh man, that model looks cool. Like the amount of like just connections you make with people that are fun and enjoyable, and it is great, right? The vibes, immaculate. They're great. And the vibes are kept immaculate because everyone's there to keep the vibes immaculate. No one's there wanting to like start trouble.
Yeah. And also,
At
I
all.
think,
And it polices itself. It doesn't require like any sort of like big rules like arbiter for like behavior. Like no, everyone just wants to have a good time at the store that they're playing their games at. So everyone has a good time. We have kids show up and they're just like, oh, look at the cool models, and like you get to show the kids the cool models and they get all excited about it. Like it is a all ages place where everyone from across different walks of life can just play with plastic army men. Like it's a great time.
it's wonderful. It's really cool. And I like that is something that I don't know. For me, at least, I have never felt anything to simulate that. Like, don't get me wrong, during lockdown, we had to do what we had to do. I mean, hell, that's how we got this show. That, like, we had to digitally try to get the same vibes that we wanted in person. We did our best with, like, online Discords, and we tried Tabletop Simulator, and we made the show, and it's something, it helps. Especially during lockdown, it was probably a damn near a godsend. But it has never, for me, felt like a replacement. Like, I don't get the same feeling as when I am in a physical space with people, just sort of enjoying the camaraderie and company.
Yeah, and I think that to sort of step away from just the hobby part of it for a second, and we'll come right back to it, don't worry. Like, this is great for current modern day problems, right? Modern day problems require modern solutions.
I mean,
And
this
the modern-
is almost a caveman solution, but yes.
Yes, but we have modern tools to do it now. But the modern problem we deal with is that everything is plugged in, right? I guarantee you, if you're listening to this, you might be at your job, and you would probably have to deal with email all day, in front of a computer all day. Many people then go home, and their relaxation activity is to play video games in front of a computer all day, or to like be on their phone, or like watch TV, or do a thing that is still plugged into the general zeitgeist of like media, yada yada yada, right? Screen time through the roof. Having a place like this as a sort of refuge in which you know you can just like, most of the time you're going to use your phone to maybe look at your rules, but other than that, it's going to sit down on the table as you're like pushing stuff around, rolling dice, chatting, having a good time. We've got fridges at ours where you can just like pay a little bit of money, like a very small amount of money, to just grab a drink. Like, oh, 50 cents. I got a Diet Coke. Awesome. Like,
There's some snacks.
there's some
There you go.
snacks. People go get food. People have food delivered. Like, it's great. And what makes ours even better is that we can do that 24/7. The store itself has open times in which it's open and you can like go and buy stuff, yada yada yada. But because we're members and we are helping support this place, we can just show up whenever we want. We've had entire days where we show up at like 9 a.m. and then we just don't leave till like 1 a.m.
3 a.m. once.
Yeah, and which like people came and went, but we had like people coming and going, having a great time, hanging out, doing the thing. Nobody had to clean. Like, we all cleaned up afterwards, obviously, but like nobody had to like prep their house. Nobody had to clean their house. Nobody had to like figure out where everyone was sleeping. Everyone just showed up, hung out for hours, and then went home when they wanted to. Like, that's great, right? It removes many of the barriers of making these in-person things happen, because though we have modern technology to schedule things better, that also means we're all busier. So it's harder to schedule things because the time itself is taken up. But if you have to do less prep work and then just show up at a place, it makes it way easier.
Because it's a shared thing. And I think there's value in that inherently.
I think the next sort of thing that we're going to talk about, though, is if you have one of these, awesome. And you should just keep supporting it. Like, we weren't going to call any store name specifically, but we will say where we go to hang out. if you're in the area, is Tactical Retreat Gaming in Amelia, Ohio, near Cincinnati and like northern Kentucky area.
It's like 10 minutes across the river into Ohio if you're in Kentucky.
Yeah.
It's like a reference. So it's right between both states. It's a great place to hang out, and it's only getting cooler. And through it, I've been able to meet some really, really awesome people that I just don't think I would have had the privilege of getting to meet and hang out with without this neutral space that we all sort of come to.
Yeah, and so like we help this stay afloat and stay around by volunteering both our money for memberships and like paying for the membership and like buying stuff there. And also when they ask for help with stuff, we just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like they're going to be moving locations relatively soon, like a couple doors down or whatever. And they're like, hey, can like anybody want to come help us move stuff? And
Yes.
a bunch of us just like, hell yeah, I can. Can I bring an army and play a game after? Like,
I pick things up, I put them down. It's one of those things that like you know it when you see it. And if there's a place near you, as we talk about these goofy stories and hanging out and having a good time, if a place is coming to your mind and cool people that you've met at your local shop or local club or what have you, you know it when you see it. If that's a third space for you, all I would ask is that like if it brings you any sort of validation or joy, just try to keep it alive where you can. Do what you can. And even if you don't have a lot of money, effort goes a long way. Like you don't have to spend a lot of money to run a little league for them, or like try to demo games for new players,
or like just say, hey, I started playing this game and me and my buddy play it. Can we come up to the store and like, can you put it on your schedule so if other people want to show up, they can? Or doing paint and takes where you're like, oh, I have way more miniatures in my backlog than I'm ever going to actually use. What if I just break these up and just invite everyone to an event where we each grab a different clan rat and we just paint a different clan rat, and like you can bring your kids and they can try it if they want. Like these are all events and things you could do that like don't require money, right? Or very little money. You just do it at the store, and like that. It helps provide community. It builds community. It builds this up as a concept, which we have found extremely rewarding and only continues to be rewarding. And that is a thing you could do. But if you don't have that space, what do you do? Right, Joe?
Yeah.
Like, if you can't, if you live outside of a city, this is probably a place that just doesn't exist for you. So, like, this sounds all good, but, like, what happens if you're that person?
Yeah, because for us, like, that's the thing where I read all of the sort of pseudo-academic stuff, and, like, I agree with a lot of it, and it's great. But where the rubber meets the road, it's not nearly so clean. We get messages all the time on the show because we are Kentucky Fried Wargaming. Like, we're Kentucky boys. When you're used to a place that's like that's this rural, that's this spread out, that you have to go to a place like Cincinnati to find a cool game shop, it's pretty common when you appeal to people like that to hear from listeners who don't have shops near them at all, anywhere near them. I'm hours from like the nearest game shop, and even that game shop might mostly be a Magic the Gathering card shop and not actually a game shop.
Or like board games. Like it's like all D&D board games and like Magic the Gathering, and they have like a small Citadel shelf with some paint on it and like 2 starter sets and a rule book.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's not going to do. It's driving all that way, one, ain't going to happen, and 2, it's not going to give you the fun that you want. And in that case, what you do is tricky. So what I would say is that, like, if you are hearing all of this and you do not have a third space near you currently, but there are any in your mind that you think might be able to be that place for you, go check it out. Scout it out. Try. Just give it a little whirl. If there isn't one even near you, though, or the one you go to just does not fit the vibe, maybe consider if you want this bad enough, and if you think this would bring you enough joy and sort of fulfillment and socialization to maybe get together with people near you and try to make your own, if it's possible. And there are some challenges to that from like the academic definition of like a third place, that like it's got to be a home away from home and like have its own space and blah 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 blah. And like if y'all have a lot of money and you could just rent a space somewhere, cool. I suspect that will not be the case for almost anybody.
But like, there's other options out there, right? Like
absolutely.
A common thing in like Europe, from what I've seen people talk about in all the spaces I'm in, is that like they'll rent out church basements or like parts of churches that like they're like, hey, we just go there every couple of weeks and we meet up and we have a day where we all play games together. And we all let everyone know, and we've got like a Discord where we just keep everyone up to date about what things we're doing. And then we have a schedule, and people show up, and we have big events like every couple of weeks to hang out. It's the best we can do, so it's what we do. We don't have a shop. This is what we do. Some people might even just have like a really big garage or shed that they just have access they can do. And they just like, I threw like an old couch that instead of just throwing away, I put back in here. We've got bookcases full of books, rule books, and 2 tables. And
every Wednesday, we know we crack the garage and like we're gonna play games and hang out.
I just like I let my wife know on Wednesdays that the garage door's gonna be open and like people are probably gonna come over and play games. And then we just invite people to come out and play them.
Or basements. Like I again live in Kentucky. A lot of houses have basements here, even unfinished. If it's waterproof, you could turn that into a thing. It might take a little bit of effort. It might take a little bit of handiwork, but you could make it to where you could fit a couple of fold-out tables from Walmart in there to try to get some people over. You run some lighting in there. You try to make it at least playable, and maybe it is a little trashy, but hell, y'all, we love a little trashy. Look at what you're listening to.
I mean, we did this before we were going to TRG all the time. Like, we ran events 4 or 5 times a year in which we would plan a weekend months ahead of time, where we would set a date and we would get all the material we needed, the terrain, the playmats, the objectives, the terrain. Like, we would all collectively, like 12 of us, get together and make everything we needed for the thing. And then we would show up and we'd play a bunch of games as much as we could in like 2 days. And then we'd all go back home and then we would talk about it. Was it ideal? No. But it was something, right? Like, that is way better than just being like, yeah, I sometimes play a game like every 6 months. Or like I really only get to play the game when I go to like the 3 tournaments a year I go to. Or I only get to play like this game when I go to like this one convention a year.
It's just like, that's a sad thing to miss out on.
Like, there's an opportunity here. And like, truly, if you see that this is a problem in your community and maybe you're part of a Discord in like an area and you want to help remedy that, there's probably people who are willing to help you with that.
Yeah.
In our experience, not just in this hobby, but in most hobbies, most people that are into a thing enough to talk about it are willing to put in a little bit of effort. It doesn't matter if it's motorcycles, Dungeons and Dragons, like Wargaming, Magic the Gathering, going hunting, like cooking. People will find excuses to make the thing they want to do happen. They just probably have an easier time doing that with some help. So, like, find some friends, figure it out together.
I mean, like, the garage example of, if you have, like, a Discord in, like, your greater area, you know, like, maybe you're in the Southern Wyoming Age of Sigmar Discord. Like, I don't know if that's a thing, but it could be a thing. That
sounds awesome. If that's a thing, someone invite me, please. That sounds amazing. I would like to see what Southern Wyoming's AOS scene looks like.
I don't know how many of y'all there are, but like,
I'm imagining it's a ton of Ogre Maw tribes. I don't know why.
Hell yeah, brother. I feel this. Don't get me started. I can't talk about AOS 4 too early. But like, if you're in that Discord and you don't have places near you and none of the shit works, and you're just like, oh, maybe I can open my garage like on a Wednesday. Like, I got a big garage and I can pull the cars out. But I don't really have bookcases. Okay. Message in the Discord. Hey, one, would anyone be down to help me build some bookcases? Like, I'm trying to make a communal, like, get-together space in my garage. would folks be down to like come over on a day and help me build some like cheap Walmart bookshelves and put them up? I bet you multiple someones will be willing to show up and help with that. Or, hey y'all, do anybody just like have run down old bookshelves? Like they can look terrible. It doesn't matter. We can just put like models and books on them for like game rules. People will probably show up. If you build it, they will come. And donate bookshelves and stuff to help with the project. Hey, anybody got like old couches or chairs or fold out stuff like for people can hang out, we can play some games? Again, if you build it, people will come. And you could sort of group lift your way through this. And it might not be a game store, but by God, you can get a lot of the same really awesome benefits. Even if you don't have the like central building all on its own.
Yeah. And like that the whole point is to get together and play the games collectively. And more importantly than any of that is build a community around doing so. Where you're not just limited to like internet conversations.
You're going to meet some real people who are probably pretty cool and make some friends and some connections. And just have a better time. Enjoy yourself in the downtime you got. Let's be honest, a lot of people don't have a lot of it. And if you could do anything to make yours better, might be worth thinking about. And I think for us, that's the big thing we want to end on, is that, you know, if you don't have one, you could maybe try to get one. And if there is anything we can do, we give a lot of calls to action. This is the one I most care about. If there's anything we could do to help you in trying to do that, if that's coming up with ideas, if that's trying to help you find a Discord group, if that is, you know, trying to make connections and recommend games or minis or 3D printer, blah, 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 blah. Reach out. Let us know.
I mean, we've even discussed making a Discord for the show.
Yes.
For this purpose. Like, don't get me wrong, we want to talk to all y'all, and we love, like, that y'all comment on our videos. But like a lot of y'all like to talk to each other, and it'd be super cool if we had a Discord where y'all can like get to know each other and maybe even like see if y'all live close enough to be able to play games with each other. That sounds awesome. Like we are huge here on trying to get people together doing stuff.
It's a thing that has brought us a lot of joy and fulfillment, and like it would be real shitty of us to not try to help other people get the same thing. You know, it's not a zero-sum game. We can all get there. So if there's anything we can do to help you, please reach out. Also, like and subscribe is always good so we could get these to other people to try to broaden our net. We'd really appreciate it. It'd be real helpful. And maybe over time, if we keep broadening the net enough, we could make some connections here for y'all.
Here's the hoping.
And if you are in the area, you know, Tactical Retreat Gaming in sort of east side of Cincinnati, feel free to look into it if it's at all within your driving distance. It's a hell of a place I really, really enjoy. And it looks like the actual physical space might be about to get even better. So we'll see. We'll be working on some more videos that'll be coming out soon. And hopefully you'll like some of those. And we'll keep hammering away to try to find more ways to take academic concepts and break them down to be less in the weeds.
And, like, as a final note, this was a weird topic. This was outside of our comfort zone. This was different from our usual parlance. This was kind of two chucklefucks talking about a thing that they don't fully understand, but they kind of understand and they want to share it with people. If this is something that you enjoyed, if this is something you have criticism for, if this is something that you think that we could improve on and you want to see more of, feel free to comment down below. If it's a thing that you hated and you don't want us to ever do again, also feel free to comment below. If this is a thing that like you think that we should just not touch, okay. If you think this is baseless, okay. You can talk about it, right? We want any and all feedback about this sort of stuff. We would like to try to do things outside the box a little bit more in the future. This is one of those things. Give us feedback on if you liked it, if you didn't like it, if it's bad, or if you just want more information. Truly, we are open to any and all communication on this.
We'd appreciate it. For now, that's been all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. See y'all in the next one.